In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Neural DSP powered by Omega Granophyre. Man, what a mouthful. But before we begin, here is a demo song with this thing in a mix. Alright, so this plugin is the latest addition to the line of Neural DSP plugins. I'm really excited about it. I've been excited about it because I kind of knew through the grapevine that maybe this was the next thing coming out back a couple months ago. And my video is quite late because this came out, I think, on Valentine's Day, which is the weirdest time to release anything. But what can you do? It's all good. Here we go. So I am currently just in the default mode with this. So what were my first impressions? Because I've had some time with it. Well, with this guitar, this is an 8-string guitar, I had a lot of issues coming up with a tone that I liked at first. But once I understood a few things, it made it a lot easier. So right now we're in the default mode here. We have such a beautiful setup actually. This is so awesome. So the high or normal oversampling rate as per usual, input, gate, output. The gate is quite harshly up there, right? -40 is a lot. So in terms of EQ, this is what it sounds like on the default mode. Now, just for those of you who want to know, because I know that you're going to have this question, this is a low D right now. Let me tune that back all the way up to F sharp for a second though. So there's a lot of low thunk in this. Actually, I'm going to turn up my volume in the room here. There's a lot of awesome low thunk, but it does feel a little bit too much low going on. And we can do a lot to abate that. So let's start at the beginning. Why don't we? All right, so we're going to look at input and gate. I think the gate is just a little too aggressive. I usually write it at about 60. And I do like the high oversampling. It just sounds a certain way to me. So this is the Plumes pedal by Earthquaker Devices. And I did a little bit of research because, I mean, if they've sampled what this pedal really sounds like, then you might as well understand what these 3 different modes are. So it looks like a good old classic screamer of tubes, and it's got the level, tone, and gain, which is kind of obvious. But so mode 1, 2, and 3 are 3 different kind of circuitry settings. So mode 1, I believe, is LED, which is like really, I think the website called it raunchy. It's like a bit more gritty. Mode 2 is like a clean boost. So it's like a proper clean kind of like from your guitar, let's say. And mode 3 is the typical screamy style. But on the Earthquaker website, they say that that's like, it's a tube screamer without any muffledness. So you still get a lot of tightness and stuff, but there's no overt muffledness. And so what I've actually found is that this can be at the flick of a mode, and with some reverb and delay, you can have like a really fat, awesome sounding lead sound. And a lot of their presets are really fantastic that are already built into this plugin. It's really inspiring actually. But so let's start with this. I typically don't want to have the tone too high. It seems to live at about here. for me, and I'm just going to show you guys my actual settings here. I don't like to add too much gain because it's got a lot of gain. This thing has got a lot of gain. Let's hear what that did so far. Let's turn on the pedal too. So you can hear that there's quite a bit of a difference there. Sounds pretty great already. There's still a lot of low-end thunk. Let's see what 3 does. All right. So there's definitely more lower end kind of feeling, resonance, if you will, in mode 2. And mode 1 just does seem a little bit hairier, a bit crazier, a bit wilder. But I think I like mode 3 the most so far. Pretty nice. All right, so moving on to the amp section here. This is a really awesome switch. This higher low switch basically means, I don't think it has anything to do with pickups necessarily, but the lower voicing is a lower gain that's a little looser. You definitely are able to access more classic rock tones with it, and the higher gain one is obviously the higher gain one. But this is quite a lot of gain, so I'm actually going to dial you back down. I'm going to cut the bass a little bit, and I'm going to cut this depth a little bit. And just see how this sounds, just to try to clean up that low end with this guitar. I think that we're getting that good low end saturation now. I just want to push some of these frequencies. I think we're getting there. There's quite a lot of hair happening, so I see why the gate was so high. Yeah, and like I immediately would already use this tone. Honestly, I might cut down the gain a little bit more here. Pretty interesting how just from a few like clicks of whatever, it starts to change up. So this is a voice switch. This is like a higher mid focus. So this is what this sounds like with the voicing of the mids turned on. It's got a really good kind of cutting, huge mid boost. But I do prefer the voice switch down, as you can tell. So I want a little bit more bass, maybe a little bit. I'll leave the mids alone. Let's see how this sounds. See, now at this point, I'm pretty happy with how this sounds. I don't touch the level or the master. They respond really naturally and organically like the actual amplifier from what I understand. So the master seems to mess with the mids a little bit and have an actual like, well, it's as if you're turning up the master on an amplifier. That's why Neural DSP is so good at what they do. And the level seems to have a little bit of that as well from my experience, which is really weird. I really don't like the sound, personally speaking. I love leaving these at noon, and I'm gonna leave them at noon. It's just not for me to mess around with having more mids. I have enough mids. These are very mid-heavy pickups. It wouldn't make sense with this guitar. So that's an interesting thing to perhaps take away. If you have a guitar that could add a little bit of mids, you want to have that hotter feeling and hotter sound, man, just mess with the master. But the last thing I'd like to do before we get into the EQ and amp section, or sorry, the cabinet section, is mess with the tubes here. So we're in the 6L6 right now. I actually need a different pick for what I want to do here. All right. Sounds pretty awesome, pretty beastly. EL34. So there's something a little bit more like vintage modern about this kind of tube with this amp. It feels like I could play mid 2000s, early 2000s, sorry, Morbid Angel riffs with this. Like, Just feels like it sounds right with that, and so that's a very death metal sound, like classic death metal sound to me. The KT66 was an interesting choice to include in this plugin because it's such a headroom reliant tube. I'm sure that there's a lot of doom metal people like, this is wrong, this is so bizarre, but the KT stuff is really great for headroomy things. And I had a friend tell me, oh yeah, it loses a lot of lows. All I've found is that there's a lot more volume and a bit of an odd boost to the mids. Let me listen to this and you tell me what you think in the comments. So that's this KT66, which is my favorite so far. It's pretty interesting, that difference. So the thing about having an awesome, I think it's a 9-band EQ here, is that if you have a guitar that's got some issues with its EQ in terms of just like the actual pickups are outputting some things you don't like, being able to like drop a few dBs in some places that are where it's unnecessary is probably a good idea. So this is typically how I like to have my curve. And I mess with mids, again, very specific on the guitar, but this is what we've got. So this is what I would call a mix ready tone. And the only other thing I would do is probably double the plugin and maybe mess and have some more settings with the cabs. So with this plugin, you get a lot of responses. You have all of these, the MS1260 and the VM 1265. Like these are all amazing IRs. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that ML Sound Labs did these ones other than the VMs, I want to say, or maybe it's vice versa. But these sound incredible. So I'm going to just cycle through and play some zero for you. As you can tell, we've now gone into the second category of IRs here. So here's the 7B now. And we're back to the beginning. So again, you can have two different microphones. These three different tube options in the first place make it so that you've got, what is it? How many IRs do we have? It looks like we've got 1, 3, 6, 7, 1, 3, like what? Like 14 IRs times 3 different tube. Oh my goodness, what is that? That's 42 different combinations of tones without even touching your EQ or your amp or even the plumes. That's really, really cool. So I really like the tone with the 57, and I think I actually really enjoyed this one. So what's great about this now is that because I've removed these lows, I can just add them back in. I can just double click them. Ooh, I don't want it to be at 12. That would be a disaster. And I can bump up my depth and my bass a little bit now. So. And I really like that tone. It's not that much more. I mean, how many minutes have we been filming here? It's, you know, probably a few minutes here, but we got a really, really great mix ready tone. Now, that's all fun and all, but we want to also practice with this thing. So we don't necessarily want to just stay in the default. They have a bunch, right? A bunch of different ones, but I made the 080S Almighty Chug Machine patch a couple of days ago, and it sounds. And I really like that one. Now you might be like, but Paul, there's a lot of gain, man. And I would say to you, yes, that's true. But I like to practice with lots of gain because I like to be able to switch from this into like a lead tone. So what I would do is I'd sit down with this tone and I'd plug in the archetype nollie and I'd remove everything but the effects basically, and then I would just dial in the delay and reverb as I like, and I can just switch from a lead or rhythm tone whenever I want, and it's just at the click of a button of 2 different suites in my DAW. So with that all being said, what do I like about it? I feel like I can get a way more readily mixable tone that sounds super tight and super organic than I think any of the other plugins. The Nameless Suite is still kind of like, has been king of the hill, but I think because it's a very particular sound, this is the plugin that I think is my favorite. The NTS Suite is really, really lovely as well, don't get me wrong, but it's again a very specific flavor. I feel like because of the fact that you can mess with tubes on this one, as well as the fact that you have so many different kind of IRs, it really just opens up the possibilities, and it's captured really, really well. I'm really impressed with this plugin. Again, at first I really couldn't find a tone that I liked with an 8-string, and I'm like, but I really want to track with an 8-string and the Granophyre. That would be amazing in a studio, right? So I was the most excited about that, and that's why I'm not switching guitars, because this is what I really wanted the plugin for in the first place. And so now that I've kind of discovered how to get there, it's a really, really satisfying experience to sit down and practice right before I have to go and teach or whatever, right? So it's a really great plugin. I would say arguably that this is the top metal plugin out there right now. And I'm curious what would, you know, it's just like when the Nameless Suite came out, like what's going to replace this, man? Like what could possibly be better than this plugin right now? And, you know, I'm not here to sell this to you, right? Of course I'm biased, I'm an artist with the company, but damn, it sounds awesome and I'm using it all the time. That's the thing, is if I wasn't using it all the time, I wouldn't say that I was using it all the time. I'm not in the business to lie to people on YouTube. I'm sure that you folks can see right through that anyway, right? So anyhow, this has been a lot of fun. I hope that you got something out of this video. If you're considering grabbing this plugin, I highly recommend it. I'm sure that there's some kind of a trial out there as well. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video if you actually found it very informative. I feel like I'm getting into the nuts and bolts of these plugins in my own way, and it's an interesting take on things, and hopefully you think the same. All right, I've been Paul Oz. Thanks for tuning in and sticking around to the end of the video. If you're interested in my guitarist mentorship program or interested in guitar lessons in the first place, go visit templeofshred.com and you can contact me through there, and we can arrange a little student interview and I can take your guitar playing to the next level. It's all about the student in my mentorship program, hence it's mentorship. It's not just guitar lessons online, which is kind of, it's been done. You know, like let's modernize this. It's 21st century after all. Cheers, YouTube.